There are a number of major museums around the world that hold important exhibits of contemporary art, so art by living artists, on a set schedule. And often museums hold these exhibitions every other year, thus the name Biennial. And we're going to look at the 2019 Whitney Biennial. Obviously, a lot of biennials got canceled in 2020, but I think that the 2019 Whitney Biennial deals with a lot of themes that have come up this semester in class and also point to important issues in museum practice. So Warren Kanders, and you see his name on some of these protest signs here, he was the vice chairman of the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City. And he stepped down about a year in the fall of 2019 after months of protests because the company that he owns sells tear gas. And there was actually a number of artists who withdrew from the Whitney Biennial to protest his involvement. So he manufactures things like tear gas, gun holsters, bulletproof vests, and his tear gas grenades have been used against refugees on the US-Mexican border and elsewhere during protests. And so a number of artists said, I don't want to be involved with this institution if these are the kind of people who are making decisions. And one of the artists who left was a man named Michael Rakowitz, who had just a few months earlier installed his installation here, A Color Removed, in the Spaces Gallery in Cleveland. Rakowitz makes conceptual art projects that often focus on vulnerable people and communities. And he saw photographs from the US-Mexico border as a disturbingly clear visualization of what he called toxic philanthropy. This is referring to Kandor. He said, I felt like I'd be betraying everything that I've ever cared about in the work that I make if he participated in the exhibition. He continued by saying you wouldn't compromise the integrity of a work on paper by showing it in unsafe conditions. You should not compromise the integrity of an artist and ask them to show with funding and permission from people that make conditions unsafe for others. And what we're looking at in A Color Removed is Rakowitz's full gallery installation that centers around the color orange. And here what he's noting is that a lot of times orange is used for traffic cones, or we see reflective vests, different like hunting gear, that orange is often a color that denotes safety, but that there is no color of clothing or hat or any sort of item that can protect vulnerable people of color in interactions with the police. In Alexandra Bell's also very recent artwork here, she revisits articles from New York Press that deals with the coverage of the now infamous 1989 Central Park 5 case. And what happens here is that 5 innocent teenage boys of color were wrongfully convicted of assaulting and raping a white female jogger in Central Park. What Bell does is she takes the raw material of the newspapers and highlights headlines and body texts and redacts the photos to draw attention to the failings in journalistic objectivity. So, for example, here we see the big print headline, "Wolf Pack's Prey," and noting savage, that this is not journalistic objectivity, but there is a clear bias, a clear slant that is being presented here. She wants to interrogate how journalism can perpetuate racialized violence through their choice of language. And the title of Bell's series is No Humans Involved. That refers to an essay written in 1994, in which the writer responds to a radio report on the riots that followed the 1992 acquittal of 4 Los Angeles police in the beating of the unarmed black man Rodney King. And in that report, the author says, wait, no humans involved. And that phrase, no humans involved, is often describes cases involving young black men like Rodney King. The final work for our semester highlights the monumental sculpture done by Simone Leigh in New York City. This is on the High Line. This is an elevated rail line that was turned into an elevated pedestrian walkway full of landscaped sections and public art installations. The High Line is one of the coolest things to visit in New York. And Simone Leigh recently received a huge accolade because she is the first black woman to represent the U.S. at probably the most significant biennial exhibit of contemporary art, that is the Venice Biennale, that is now postponed until April of 2022. And in all of Leigh's work, she elevates the identity and labor of black women. This monumental sculpture named Brick House, and here you can see how it kind of towers not just above the High Line, but above the street level in New York. It's 16 feet tall. This single kind of abstracted, stylized image of a black woman to emphasize her beauty and strength.